For over 1,000 years, Rome stood as the greatest empire the world had ever seen. It conquered vast lands, built magnificent cities, and created laws that still shape our world today. At its peak, Rome was untouchable, an unstoppable force of power, wealth, and influence. But then, it all came crashing down. How does an empire so mighty simply disappear? What truly led to the fall of Rome? You've probably heard the simple explanation. Barbarians invaded, and that was the end. But the truth? It's far darker. Rome wasn't just conquered, it collapsed from within. Greed, corruption, betrayal, and terrible leadership slowly rotted the empire from the inside, leaving it weak and vulnerable when the final blow came. In this video, we're going to uncover the brutal truth behind the fall of the Roman Empire. And by the end, you'll see just how terrifying and chaotic Rome's final days really were. The beginning of the end. Rome was already falling apart. Many people think the fall of Rome was sudden, a dramatic event that happened overnight. But in reality, Rome had been crumbling for centuries. The warning signs were everywhere, but no one stopped the decline. Number 1, corrupt and weak emperors. Rome's leadership became a disaster. Rome's early emperors were strong, intelligent, and focused on building the empire. But as time went on, emperors became more interested in their own pleasure than actually running the empire. Some were cruel and paranoid, executing anyone they saw as a threat. Others were simply incompetent, spending all the empire's money on lavish parties, golden palaces, and pointless wars. Rome even had emperors who lasted only a few months before being assassinated. Imagine that. Being in charge of the world's greatest empire, only to be murdered by your own guards before the year was over. The government became a revolving door of chaos. Without strong leadership, Rome's problems piled up like a sinking ship taking on water. Number 2, the economy collapsed. Money became worthless. At its height, Rome was rich. Gold poured in from conquered lands and the economy flourished. But as Rome stopped expanding, the flow of wealth dried up. Desperate for money, emperors did what they thought was a quick fix. They raised taxes to unbearable levels. Ordinary people suffered. Businesses collapsed, and soon Rome's economy was in ruins. It got so bad that Roman coins became worthless. Emperors reduced the amount of silver in coins, causing massive inflation. The money Rome once ruled the world with turned into useless scraps of metal. With a crumbling economy and no new wealth coming in, Rome started running out of options. Number 3, the military became weak and unreliable. Rome's army was once the greatest in the world, disciplined, powerful, and nearly unstoppable. But by the final years of the empire, the once feared Roman legions had become a joke. Instead of training loyal Roman soldiers, emperors hired foreign mercenaries, warriors who had no real loyalty to Rome. They fought only for money and would switch sides the moment they got a better offer. With an army full of unreliable mercenaries, Rome was no longer able to defend itself. And then, the barbarians arrived. The barbarian invasions, enemies at the gates. Rome had many enemies, but none were more dangerous than the barbarian tribes, powerful warrior nations who had been watching Rome for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. Number 1, who were the barbarians? To the Romans, anyone who wasn't part of the empire was a barbarian. But these weren't just wild savages. They had their own cultures, warriors, and leaders. In fact, many of these barbarians had served in the Roman army and knew exactly how Rome fought, and more importantly, where it was weak. Number 2, the Battle of Adrianople, 378 AD. Rome's worst defeat, one of the biggest turning points in Rome's fall, came at the Battle of Adrianople. The Goths, a powerful Germanic tribe, had been mistreated by the Romans and finally decided they had enough. When the Roman Emperor Valens led his army to crush the Goths, he made one fatal mistake. He underestimated them. The result? A disaster. The Goths slaughtered the Roman army, killing thousands of soldiers and even the emperor himself. For the first time in history, Rome looked weak. And when enemies see weakness, they attack. Number 3, the sack of Rome, 410 AD. The unthinkable happens. For 800 years, Rome had stood untouched. Its walls had never been breached. But in 410 AD, the unthinkable happened. Alaric, king of the Visigoths, led his army straight into Rome. The mighty capital of the empire was looted and burned. People were slaughtered in the streets. Priceless treasures were stolen, and the once great city was left in ruins. It was a massive shock to the world. If Rome itself could fall, then the entire empire was in danger. And it only got worse. The final collapse, the fall of Rome, 476 AD. By the mid-400s, Rome was a shell of its former self. The empire that once stretched from Britain to North Africa, that had commanded the respect of the world, was now a fractured, dying relic of its former glory. The economy was in ruins. Trade had collapsed, taxes were unbearable, and corruption ran rampant. The once great Roman currency had become so devalued that merchants refused to accept it, forcing people to return to a barter system. Entire cities fell into decay as people abandoned them in search of food and security elsewhere. The Roman army, once the most feared military force on earth, was a shadow of what it had been. Many of its best soldiers were no longer Romans at all, but mercenaries from barbarian tribes, warriors who had little loyalty to the empire they were paid to protect. Worse, the empire could barely afford to pay them. Some even turned against Rome, siding with invading forces for better rewards. Meanwhile, the empire's leadership was in chaos. By the time Rome fell, the position of emperor had become almost meaningless. Rulers were often puppets, controlled by powerful generals or foreign factions. Some emperors were nothing more than teenage boys thrust onto the throne with no real power or experience. And then, in 476 AD, the final blow came. A Germanic leader named Odoacer led his army into Italy, encountering almost no resistance. The last emperor of Rome, Romulus Augustulus, was only a teenager, just a boy with a title, not a ruler of men. When Odoacer reached Rome, there was no great battle, no final defense of the empire, no heroic last stand. Instead, Odoacer simply removed Romulus from power and declared himself king of Italy. The once mighty Roman Empire, which had ruled for over 1,000 years, was gone. And just like that, the Western Roman Empire was officially dead. The Eastern Roman Empire, also called the Byzantine Empire, would survive for another 1,000 years. But Rome, the empire that had shaped the world, was no more. The aftermath. What happened after Rome fell? With Rome gone, Europe plunged into the Dark Ages, a time of war, famine, and uncertainty. The fall of the empire left a massive power vacuum, and without a strong central government to maintain order, the continent became a chaotic battleground. Cities crumbled. Many once great Roman cities, filled with grand buildings, libraries, and bustling marketplaces, were abandoned or fell into ruin. Without Roman engineers and workers to maintain them, aqueducts dried up, roads became impassable, and magnificent structures like amphitheaters and temples slowly decayed. Trade collapsed. Under Roman rule, goods flowed freely across the empire. Spices from the east, grain from Egypt, and fine goods from every corner of the Mediterranean kept Rome's economy strong. But after its fall, trade networks disintegrated. Bandits and warlords made travel dangerous, and without a central authority to enforce order, merchants stopped moving goods between cities. Economies shrank, and many people were forced to survive by farming small plots of land. Knowledge and learning faded away. Rome had been a center of education, science, and philosophy. Scholars translated Greek texts, doctors advanced medical knowledge, and architects designed buildings that still stand today. But after Rome's fall, schools shut down, libraries were abandoned, and much of this knowledge was lost. Europe became a land where superstition replaced science, and for centuries progress slowed. The world became a more dangerous place. Without Rome's powerful legions to enforce the peace, smaller kingdoms and warlords fought constantly for power. Entire regions were devastated by invasions, from the Germanic tribes to the Vikings, leaving ordinary people to suffer through war, famine, and instability. But despite all this, Rome's legacy never truly died. Its laws, architecture, and culture still shape our world today. The Latin language evolved into French, Spanish, Italian, and many other modern languages. Roman engineering techniques were rediscovered and used to build new cities. Even the United States government is based on ideas taken from ancient Rome. such as the Senate and the concept of a republic. The empire may have fallen, but its influence still lives on, proving that even in collapse, Rome was never truly gone. Conclusion: could Rome have been saved? Some historians believe Rome's fall was inevitable, that no matter what, it was doomed to collapse. Others argue that better leadership, stronger defenses, and smarter economic policies could have saved it. But one thing is clear: Rome wasn't just conquered by enemies. It destroyed itself. Greed, corruption, betrayal. These weren't just the enemies of Rome. They are the enemies of every empire in history. And if history has taught us anything, it's this: even the mightiest empires can fall, and when they do, they never rise again.